Good afternoon. This is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. I'm standing in my little front yard food forest here in Portland, Oregon, and my neighbor is going to use power tools. Hello, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. I'm standing in the front yard of my little food forest here in Portland, Oregon, and we are in zone 8B. I wanted to share one of my favorite perennial greens, and part of the reason that I'm picking now in mid-January to share it with you all is because I'm still harvesting it. Despite the fact that we had snow, despite the fact that we had temperatures in the low 20s, this plant is still producing really well, and it is a green that I enjoy all through late winter, all through early and mid-spring, and it is a perennial. I have had the same original patch of it in this yard for 12 years, and of course I have divided it and moved clumps around, so now I have several patches. So let's talk today about French sorrel. Now, French sorrel is Rumex scutatus, and it is a perennial, low-growing, leafy vegetable. It's really high in vitamin K, calcium, and a good source of iron. Now, you do need to be aware if you're growing this, much like growing kale and collards and spinach, the French sorrel leaves are really high in oxalic acid. So if you are prone to kidney stones, that's an issue for you. You want to not consume this veggie raw. You want to really cook it, and you also want to just limit your consumption altogether. But for the rest of us that don't have that problem, this is a fantastic, nutritious veggie that's really easy to grow. So French sorrel, which is also called shield leaf sorrel, is one of many kinds of edible sorrel. I also have sheep sorrel growing in my garden. But the leaves of French sorrel are really nice and large, and they have a lovely, light, crisp, lemony flavor. They have that lemony quality because they're very acidic. So they pair really nicely with something like lamb or pork or any kind of rich, creamy dish. I love making soup in the spring that is a French sorrel soup with great northern beans like a white bean and shallots and heavy cream. It's really, really delicious. You can also just toss them in a stir fry and mix them with some pesto. I like them stir fried with peas and again, shallots or leeks, something like that. So you may notice recipes for French sorrel are traditionally kind of utilized in the springtime. It's a springtime dish, but here in the Pacific Northwest, again, zone 8B, it's fairly mild. I find that it's something you can enjoy in the winter as well. Now, if we have really, really cold temperatures, like in the teens, it can die back to the ground. But I've found that all three of my clumps of it are doing quite well, and I can continue to harvest from it. Now, as the season goes on, you find that it tends to kind of concentrate more oxalic acid in the tissues, and you find that you're kind of moving on to other plants as well that are now producing more, like your mustard greens or your kales or your spinach or your lettuces. So it's something that I kind of reserve and cherish for the late winter months and the early spring months. It's often traditionally eaten at Easter time. French sorrel, you can start it from seed. I started mine from seed. It's very, very easy. As soon as the ground can be worked in spring. And for us here, that means maybe late February, maybe mid-March, before it's really, sorry, that car's speeding. Wow, it's really speeding. So that means you start it pretty darn early in the year, direct sow in the garden. And again, in a half day to full day sun. It doesn't like full shade, but I found it's pretty hardy and it comes up pretty reliably. Now, the young babies of it are very tender and slugs do like them. In fact, let me show you here. You can see even now in winter, the slugs have really been feasting on this. They can't kill a mature plant, and so they nibble pretty heavily on it. And these, I might eat these, but I also might just feed them to the ducks and chickens, which really enjoy it as a late winter green. But what you find is that the baby leaves are really susceptible to slugs and snails. So if you have a significant snail problem where you are, you may want to start this indoors and then transplant it out. But again, I'm in Portland and it's pretty darn sluggy here, and I didn't have any trouble starting it outdoors. But if you're concerned about getting a significant number of the seedlings to thrive, you may consider starting it indoors. So it will form a clump, as I said, probably about 18 inches across eventually. It's slow growing. And those clumps are really easily divided. Also this time of year, late winter or through early spring, just stick your shovel in the middle like you're dividing your peonies or your rhubarb. Take a chunk of it, transplant it, and it's going to do great. I've even had to move sorrel in August, and I transplanted it into a sheltered location, and it was fine. So it's pretty darn hardy. It's pretty forgiving of kind of abuse by the gardener. So I don't fertilize it. I don't feed it in any way other than my typical maintenance of my beds. I really enjoy using sorrel in my fruit guilds here in the front yard, but I also have it growing along the side yard. It's far more than one family can consume to grow 3 patches of sorrel. But again, I do feed it to my ducks and chickens. And I find that it is a really nice kind of understory fruit guild plant. Here you can see this is my peach tree, and I have a little patch of sorrel growing right down here. Now, as the temperature gets hotter, as we move into summer, what you find is that the sorrel will bolt. It sends up a long spire full of, eventually, these little tiny seeds. Now, you can let those go to maturity, save it, restart it from seed, or you can suppress bolting, and there is some thought that this might lengthen the lifespan of the plant, but I, again, have had one going for 12 years and I never bother to cut off the seeds. You can cut off that stalk and throw it to your ducks and chickens or just compost it. French sorrel is available from just about any seed catalog. I noticed that Territorial has been advertising it. It's really easy to start from seed. Goes for years and years and years, decades. It is something that does very well with very little care. If you don't mind eating leaves that might have a little bit of nibbles from slugs on it, then you're looking at a really nutritious, delicious, bright lemony vegetable that you can enjoy in late winter if you live somewhere like Portland, but definitely in the spring. If you live in a colder climate and it goes really dormant all the way to the ground until the spring, you can look forward to those fresh green, spear-shaped, shield-shaped leaves starting in early spring. Pick them. They're often the first greens. So give French sorrel a try and you will be able to take advantage of yet another perennial green you can grow in your fruit guilds, yet another early spring vegetable with a really bright, springy, crisp flavor, lots of nutrition, and another level of diversity to add to your diet, another level of fresh veggies out of the garden really early in the season or really, really, really late at the tail end of the season when other greens are not available in the garden. Again, French sorrel, Rumex scutatus, delicious perennial green. Highly recommend it for your food forest, permaculture design, or your traditional veggie garden. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and please share with your friends and consider subscribing. I'm so close to 15,000 subscribers. That would be amazing if I could get there this month. I will be back later this week. Thanks.